All right, let's talk Las Vegas Raiders. This is a team that dominated the early part of the offseason. It's kind of slowed down a little bit. Now that we prepare for the draft, with some news that has occurred over the past few days, it looks like the Raiders have been handed a golden opportunity. In fact, the Raiders now have a bunch of different moves they could make, and this whole dynamic with this Raiders offseason just got a lot more interesting. We'll break that down in just a second. But first, I'm Nick, that's Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the biggest question mark after, of course, filling out the coaching staff for the Raiders this offseason was going to be the quarterback position. Then they went out and traded for Geno Smith, and that seemed to answer that, at least for the short and medium term, bring a lot of stability and really quality performance with Geno Smith coming to the Raiders. People earlier this offseason had linked the Raiders to potentially going after quarterback in the draft, but after the addition of Geno Smith, that talk seemed to be put to bed for a while. But with news that's happened over the past few days, it looks like the Raiders have that door opened once again, and they got a lot of opportunities here. Let's first of all get into the biggest news. It was a couple days ago that it was announced, and I think it's been formalized across the board here. But at the time, it was breaking. Let's go ahead and pull up the tweet here from NFL's Twitter account. Quarterback Russell Wilson is signing with the Giants on a 1 year, $10.5 million guaranteed deal worth a chance to earn 21 million bucks. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, Russell Wilson is now going to the New York Giants. Now, why does that matter for the Raiders? Let's go ahead and go to the next graphic here, and this is just the top 8 teams in the upcoming NFL draft order. You have the Titans 1, you have the Giants at 3, the Browns at 2, Patriots, Jaguars, and then the Raiders at 6. You can see on the screen there. Now, why does this matter? If you look at the teams that were needing to go after a quarterback, it was the Tennessee Titans and the New York Giants. The Titans have Will Levis. Are they in love with Will Levis? Seemingly not. They're probably going to go Cam Ward. That seems to be the prevailing wisdom right now. The Giants at 3 were really heavily linked to Shedeur Sanders. There are some rumblings now that after the addition of Russell Wilson, they are 100% all in on the Travis Hunter train potentially if the Cleveland Browns don't pick up Hunter at number 2. Now, what does that mean? We know the Patriots and the Jaguars have their quarterback, the young talented quarterback, both those teams. So that means the Raiders at 6 could conceivably get Shedeur Sanders, a guy they have been linked to a number of times to come in, learn behind Geno Smith, learn what it takes to be an NFL quarterback in a really good organization with leadership from Spytech and Pete Carroll. Tom Brady, there's definitely a relationship there with Sanders. He could potentially be the long-term answer, or the Raiders could potentially trade back and get a haul for any team like the New Orleans Saints, for example, trying to get their long-term answer at quarterback moving up to number 6. I think the Raiders have a lot of great options here, and I think they're going to make a massive move one way or another. I think the future definitely got a little bit brighter, and this quarterback situation definitely just got a lot more interesting in Las Vegas. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Raider Nation, in the comment section below. Now that all this news has happened and the dust has settled, what do you want the Raiders to do at 6? Do you want them to go quarterback? Do you want them to trade back? Do you want them to sit where they are but not draft a quarterback? Ashton Gianti has been linked to the Raiders a number of times. What do you want the Raiders to do now that all the dust has settled and the quarterback situation across the National Football League is a lot more stable? We want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. But Miles, over to you. What are your thoughts on this entire Raiders situation?
Yeah, Nick, I tend to think that the Raiders, they're set up really well first and foremost right now. Now the Giants go after Russell Wilson seemingly means that they're probably not going to be investing in the quarterback market here. I think that's going to be a really interesting situation that the Raiders are in. And I think the Raiders are in the perfect situation to capitalize on just that. Obviously, things can change. Teams could trade up ahead of the Raiders. There's a lot on the board, but now they're set. And I think they're in a really strong position to go after a quarterback. And if the guy comes to them that they like, I think they take him. I think if it's Shedeur Sanders, this is a guy they know they've really liked. They've been growing on him all over this past offseason, all of this whole season, really. We've heard about it. I think they try and grab him if they can because I don't think they want to let their guy that they wanted to come to them pass them in a draft again. We all know last year they were heavily linked, heavily like Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was a guy that they thought that could be the future of that team. Obviously, they weren't in a position to get him, and we all saw how Jaden Daniels turned out. He had a really great rookie season for himself. So I think Spytech and Co, this new Raiders front office, they're saying, hey, we've got Geno Smith, and for right now, we are good, but we are not good for the future. Geno Smith is not the long-term answer, especially being the age that he is. He's a guy that, maybe you get 2, maybe you get 3 good years out of him, but you need to think about the future, and they're in a perfect opportunity right now to grab a quarterback if it falls to them. And I think when you look at these draft visits, you see what's available and who is the Raiders have been talking to. I really think that they are looking at Shedeur Sanders because you see the quarterbacks they've talked to so far. They've talked to Quinn Ewers, they've talked to Will Howard, and they've talked to Cam Ward. And I think that's specifically just they know Shedeur Sanders inside and out. They don't need to waste a top 30 visit on him. You only get 30. So why waste a visit on a guy that you already know all about? You know what his deal is. You know that you like him. They're just doing their due diligence. Is any of these other quarterbacks, do we trade back and look for a Will Howard or Quinn Ewers? Are these guys that we really like? Is there an opportunity there? Do we somehow, if Cam Ward falls to us, is that a guy that we like as well? Let's do our due diligence on the quarterback position here. But I think all in all, the fact they don't bring in, Shedeur Sanders means they have their mind made. If Shedeur Sanders comes to the Raiders at 6, they're going to get him. If somehow he does not make it that far down, they've got other options later in the draft that they may trade back for. Like you said, get a haul. There's a lot of QB needy teams that want to move up. I think the Raiders are setting up for something really big here, and that's either a big trade back where they get a lot of draft capital or the acquisition of quarterback Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, let's talk about the quarterback interviews that they're doing right now in terms of the visits. And you brought up a great point. You talk about Cam Ward, and then you got Ewers and some of the other guys. I think what the Raiders are doing here is they're defining boundaries, right? Because everyone knows Cam Ward is the consensus best quarterback in the draft, and some of these other guys are considered maybe first round, fall into the first round, but really far from elite, more likely to be second or third round potential prospects. And what the Raiders are doing here is a very common practice in talent evaluation, whether it's in the NFL or like interviewing in the business world, is you try and define boundaries. You sit there and say, okay, candidate A is the best. Candidate C is significantly worse. Where does candidate B land? Is he closer to candidate A or is he closer to candidate C? And that's what the Raiders are doing here. They know Shedeur Sanders, obviously, like you brought it up. Well, you bring in these candidates on top of obviously interviewing them and seeing what they would be like with the Raiders potentially. They're also defining the boundaries and saying, okay, where does Shedeur Sanders line up? Is he closer to Cam Ward or is he closer to Quinn Ewers? Now, personally, I think he's closer to Cam Ward, but this gives the Raiders a chance to make that assertion internal to the organization. And if they do think he is closer to Ward, I definitely think they pick him at 6. And I know a lot of people, you talk to anyone about Shedeur Sanders, people are kind of, 50-50. You either love him or hate him. You think he's a great fit or you think he's a terrible fit. I think it's an ideal situation for Sanders to go to the Raiders as it sits now. Think about it. You got Tom Brady, a great mentor that they already know each other. Pete Carroll is a stable coach, right? This Raiders organization is so much more stable just this offseason than they've been in years and years past. Gruden was, I think, heading them back to being more stable. Obviously, then that fell apart. I think right now they're finally a much more stable franchise. They've got Geno Smith. You draft Shedeur Sanders, you're not going to play Sanders his rookie year. You may not even play him his second year, but you have him a chance. You give him a chance to learn behind a veteran quarterback, a guy who's overcome adversities. Whatever you say about Geno Smith, he is a good leader, good locker room guy, consummate professional. He is the kind of guy you want to learn from. And Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion, is more of a developmental kind of quarterback in terms of he's not a day one slide him in and he's going to be an awesome starter for you. He's a guy that's going to take a little bit of time to get things under wraps, figure out how he needs to play in the NFL. Can't scramble around and do a lot of crazy stuff he did at Colorado, would have to dial it back a little bit. And I think learning behind a guy like Geno Smith, who coming into the NFL was a scrambler, was a mobile guy, became a more pocket passer over time, would be just a perfect situation for Sanders. And that's sort of the irony of where it sits right now with the Raiders. The Raiders are actually perfect for Sanders right now. The big question is Sanders perfect for the Raiders? So the Raiders feel like he's a better investment at number 6 than potentially trading back or getting a guy like Gianti or someone else at number 6. I think it's a very interesting situation for the Raiders. I personally think if you think there's a slight chance, if you're Spytech, if you're Brady, if you're Carroll, if you think there's a slight chance that Shedeur Sanders is the long-term answer, you get him because the Raiders have not had a long-term answer at quarterback since I'm trying to think here. I mean, does Rich Gannon count in the early 2000s? I'm not going to count Derek Carr. He was solid, but teams are not high on him as a long-term answer. We talk about the Saints. They're trying to move on from Derek Carr. They've been trying to do it multiple times this offseason. I don't think he was a long-term answer for the Raiders, but I guess he's the closest they've had in 25 plus years. That ain't going to cut it. You need to get good at quarterback. You need to have your long-term franchise quarterback. Geno Smith could certainly be that in the short term, undeniably so. But if there's a chance Sanders is that guy, and again, you do your due diligence, you do the interview process, you do the evaluation. If there is a chance, I think you got to take him at number 6.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, Nick. And I think, this is what the Raiders are doing. They've got the plan. And when you're a Raiders fan, if you're looking at what they're doing, I think you got to feel good about it, because how often has this franchise gone and done this much due diligence? We're seeing them, get every quarterback that could possibly be in between, Cam Ward to Will Howard. We see Quinn Ewers. We see all these guys coming in and we're going to do the due diligence. We're going to do this. What else do they do? A guy they have no chance of really getting. They go out and look at, running back about Ashton Gianti. Say, is this a guy? Do we want to see him? Is this a guy, if he falls to us at 6, is it worth taking him over Shedeur Sanders? They're going through all of their dotting I's, crossing all of the T's. This is a team that no matter what happens at number 6, I think that you should feel good as a Raiders fan. This is a team that's done the research, they've done their due diligence, and you feel pretty confident. Personally, I think they get Sanders at 6. I think he does fall to them. I think they're able to go out and get him and bring in a future quarterback for this team, because, like you said, this is a team has been majorly struggling at quarterback for over, a quarter century now. If you think of it in those terms, it's been a long time since they've had a go-to guy. I think Shedeur Sanders is that guy, and I do think they're going to pick him up if he's available at number 6.
And you bring up a final great point to end on here. The process for the Raiders over the past few weeks and months has been just perfect. It's been good quality stuff. It's been good leadership from Brady, Spintek, Carroll, Davis across the board. It's been just a buttoned up, clean cut, well run organization. That was the goal, I think, Davis and really paired with Brady this offseason, was to get this team stable, to get this franchise stable, get it buttoned up, doing things the right way with the right process. And that's what we've seen the Raiders from day one. It's continued all the way up to this point. Whatever happens at number 6, stay there, trade, draft Shedeur Sanders, draft somebody else. It's clear the Raiders are finally executing a really good strategy.